And now I'm joined by Amir Oren. He's the columnist at the Haaretz newspaper. Amir, good to see you. Good to have you here with us on TRT World. So, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, there are two forces at play here. Number one is, of course, the protesters, the Israeli public, who have been out on the streets for 28 consecutive weeks now. And the second one is the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Natnayahu. And the problem here is that both of these forces are not ready to make any sorts of concessions.
You're correct, but let me make two minor remarks. First of all, both yourself and Yavuz used the term judicial overhaul. Netanyahu does not intend to overhaul the judicial branch, but to take it apart in order for the executive branch, which controls the legislative branch, the Knesset, to be supreme and really have no separation of powers. The other remark is that there are three forces here. Netanyahu is somewhat in the middle. The third force is the right-wing parties and the settlers, and they want this judicial problem taken apart in order to annex, either officially or in practice, to annex the territories and avoid dismantling the settlements. So Netanyahu right now has commitments both to the settlers. He told them that by the end of this summer session, 10 days from now, at least one piece of legislation will be passed, and you remarked on it, the reasonableness clause. This is after they tried to push through a package deal and failed a few months ago. On the other hand, not only hundreds of thousands of protesters, but also hundreds of reserve pilots in the Air Force and intelligence warriors and experts and many, many others have already announced they will no longer volunteer for service if this legislation is being pushed through. Add to that, President Biden, who demands from Netanyahu, as a prize for inviting him over to Washington, to stop the legislation, or at least base it on a very wide national consensus, which is not available.
Right, so certainly there are protests happening in Israel now. There's also international outcry, like you just mentioned, President Biden. But all of these factors have not stopped Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from doing what he wants to do. What will stop him?
Yes, but before he manages to take apart the judicial branch, there is still some force left in the judiciary. Because if the legislation is being appealed by the resistors to the High Court, both on procedure and on substance, it is very possible that the High Court will pass an injunction saying that the legislation is not valid. And then what Israel will have is a full-scale collision between the executive and the judiciary. And this could lead to blood in the streets, to civil war, if Netanyahu does not back down.
All right. Fascinating insights into the topic. Amir Oren, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World.